Right, okay, good evening, welcome. So tonight's topic is an interesting one. It's a very topical one for us here in the UK. We are about to embark on a 4-day, I think it is.
Recording in progress.
A 4-day bank holiday to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee. Yeah, so we've got 4 days of celebrating the 70 years of reign of the Queen, and therefore I thought it'd be interesting for the halacha shir to talk about a topical related halachic topic, and that is, do you make a bracha on the Queen? If you were to go tomorrow or any of the next few days and you would see her in person, maybe even not in person, what is the halacha? Do you make a bracha on seeing royalty? And we'll spread it out more generally. Brachas for kings, queens, presidents, etc., etc. Now, imagine the following scenario. It's not far from Shavuos. So tomorrow, for example, you're walking up Gold's Green Road and you want to go to Grudzinski. And as you're hovering outside Grudzinski, all of a sudden the maroon state royal Bentley is driving down Gold's Green Road, pulls up outside Grudzinski, and the fellow gets out of the front, the driver with his peak cap and his smart suit, and he comes out and is heading towards Grudzinski. And he says to you, what do you recommend? So you list off your favorites, and he heads into Grudzinski. And you sort of try your luck, and you think, Lama la, and you knock on the back window. And sure enough, the window comes down, and you have a nice chat with Her Majesty. And you think to yourself, hang on a second, really I should be making a bracha over here. You're seeing her in person. Do you make a bracha? Now, we'll come back to this scenario in a second, because this is going to link to the second shir for tonight, the Shavuos shir. But let's come back to this topic, because this raises lots of issues. What if she just drove past? What if you didn't actually see her live? What if she's behind, she's in her fancy car or carriage, but you don't see her sort of she's not in front of you? Does that make a difference? What if you remember 10 years ago, for the Golden Jubilee, is it Golden or whatever it was, Diamond Jubilee, there was a boat, sailing down the Thames. So what if you see her from a distance? Does that make a difference? So all of these different shilas. So let's take a look. The starting point is, if you've got the sheet in front of you, the starting point is a Gemara in Brachos Nun Ches Amud Aleph. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. So the Gemara in Brachos Nun Ches Amud Aleph, this is the main source for this. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, La'olam yishtadel adam la'aretz likras malchi Yisrael. A person should make every effort, should try to go to greet Jewish kings. For lo likras malchi Yisrael bavad, not only Jewish kings, ela afilu likras malchi umas ha'olam, but even non-Jewish kings from the rest of the world. She'im yizke, says the Gemara, that if you merit, yavchin bein malchi Yisrael and malchi umas ha'olam, you will be able to distinguish between malchi Yisrael and malchi umas ha'olam. So what does that mean? What's the emphasis here? The Mefarshim generally explain that it's worth seeing royalty because we'll be able to see how much greater the honor will be given to Mashiach. And therefore it's that difference that we're highlighting. Whatever honor and pomp and ceremony is given to an earthly king, how much more so, how great it will be when it comes to Mashiach. Fine. The Maharal Diskin says, actually it's very practical. It's to teach us or to learn how to properly honor a Jewish king. So when you see the royalty and the honor given to the queen, so that will teach us how to behave to a Jewish king, Mitzvah Hashem, in the fullness of time. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins this. The Shulchan Aruch says, Mitzvah lishtadel liros melachim, afilu malchei umas ha'olam. Dayan Duna told me that when he was in Geisad Yeshiva, this was the Silver Jubilee. So that was the 25th anniversary, 1977, I think. That's a while ago. And he remembers Rabbi Leib Gurvitz was the Rosh Yeshiva in Geisad, and the entire yeshiva came out of Geisad Yeshiva. They lined the streets because there was a procession and the queen was going past. And he was trying to make sure the boys fulfilled this Gemara and this halacha of mitzvah lishtadel liros melachim afilu malchei umas ha'olam. And those who were at the front, they made the bracha. Don't want to spoil the punchline, but that's going to be the halacha. You do make the bracha. Now, there are precedents to honor royalty throughout Tanakh, just two that I've picked out. One is in Parshas Miketz, when Yosef is taken out of the bur, out of prison, the pasuk says, "Vayishlach par vayikras Yosef vayiritzu min haber vayigalech vayichalech simloisov." He shaved, he had a haircut, and he changed his clothes. Vayovel paro. Says Rashi mipnei kovet hamalchus. He did all this in order to honor the king. Says the Torah Moshe, which is the Chasam Sofer. Says the Chasam Sofer. Interestingly, the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah Yud Amud Beis that this all took place on Rosh Hashanah. It says, "Rosh Hashanah Yotzu Yosef Beis Asurim." And we know Yosef Kiyem HaTorah Ad Shelo Nitna. Yosef HaTzadik kept the entire Torah before it was given. Therefore, how could he allow himself to shave on Yontov? Therefore, says the Chasam Sofer, Lekach Pirush Rashi, Bishvil Kovet HaMalchus Shari. That for Kovet HaMalchus you are even allowed in pre-Matan Torah to shave on Rosh Hashanah to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Kovet Malchus. And that's, he says, that the Chasam Sofer says, it's Machlokas Shach and Taz, and this is according to the Shitta of the Shach. There's another precedent, of course, in Parshas Vayigash. The Pasuk says later, when Yaakov Avinu came down to Mitzrayim, Yosef introduced him to Paro. Says the Pasuk, Vayivorech Yaakov es Paro, that Yaakov benched Paro. Says the Chemdas Yomim, Lama Birch LaRasha, he was not a tzaddik. Why did Yaakov Avinu bless this wicked person? Says the Chemdas Yomim, Mishum Kovet Malchus. Now, here's the interesting line. The Omri, Malchus de Latato mein Malchus de El. The earthly royalty gives you a feeling, a semblance of what real Malchus is. That's the whole point. Fine. Now, the Gemara in Brachas carries on. Nun Ches Amud Aleph. Haroye Malchi Yisrael Omer Baruch Shecholak Mechvoide Lireov. There is a bracha. Says the Gemara in Brachas, the bracha is when seeing a Jewish king, it's Shecholak Michvoide Lirev. HaKadosh Baruch Hu apportioned some of the honor due to him to those who fear him. Melech Umas Ha'olam, when it's a non-Jewish king, it's Baruch Shenosan Michvoide Lebasav Adam. And again, this is brought in Halacha, the Shulchan Aruch in Hilchas Brachas in Reish Chaf Dalet. Paskins this. Malchi Yisrael Omer Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam Shecholak Mikvoide Lireov, and on non-Jewish kings it's Shenosan Mikvoide Lebasav Adam. Just in case you were thinking maybe it's only kings and not queens, the Shevet Halevi Rav Vosna says Mefurish Be'enai Pashut Ma'od LaHalacha De'ein Chiluk Bein Melech LeMalka. No difference. So therefore, says Rav Vosna, it does not make a difference if it's a king or queen. You would make the bracha on a queen as well. Now, the question is, what constitutes the king or queen? In other words, do they need power? Maybe the Gemara is referring to kings and queens of old, where they had power of life and death, off with your head. But nowadays, really the queen is more of a figurehead. She hasn't got the power that they had once upon a time. So maybe not. And moreover, the Rambam, when he brings this Gemara, he codifies this halacha. He adds an interesting word. Says the Rambam, paragraph 5, Haroye Malchi Yisrael Omer Baruch Shenosan Michvoidai Umigvurasai Lireov. He adds the words Gevura. The Radvaz says that, according to this Rambam, you only make a bracha if the king has power, and he says La halacha that they've got to have the power to sentence people to death. Now, the Shevet Halevi makes a very interesting point. Look at the next paragraph. The Shevet Halevi again is Rav Vosna. V'chein poshet be'enai. It seems clear to me, says Rav Vosna, da'afilu ein biyod laharig mamish. Even if the king or queen has not got the capacity to kill, beli hisyatus im roshi hashilton, without governmental advisors, without their support. Mikol mokum hayos hi ayhu hayos mechubadim imam. Since the king or queen are getting they're the primary recipient of the honor. Imam v'cholkim lahem kavod she'ein dugma, so they get tremendous kavod. Rayu levarech aleim shenasan mechved. It's appropriate to make the bracha on them. V'chein yir lehedja mitshuvas Radvaz, and he quotes this Radvaz who says that honor and that power is needed. But he says, Hashem menu mekar hasvar, the tzorich she'biyod laharg shehu b'kitzv magen Avram, etc. De'ein hamadu be'ela me'elu shenisnamnu al-yedei hamelech. What is the Radvaz referring to? To those people who were appointed by the king or queen. So certain ministers if they have the power of life and death, then you can make the bracha over the ministers themselves. But the king or queen, him or herself, regardless of whether they have the power to kill someone, you would still make the bracha on them. It's only on the appointees. If the king appoints someone and they have real power of life and death, then you can make on those people. But the king or queen herself, power is not needed. Why? Because if you're appointed by the king or queen and you haven't got that capacity, you haven't got that full power, so it shows that you're not, so significant. However, but that doesn't apply to the king himself. The lack doesn't take away the bracha. They are the king, they are the recipient of all honor, and therefore it's posher that you would make a bracha. Okay, now, what about a wicked king? What if you were to see a very wicked king, or by extension, let's say you've got a person, a dictator. Yeah, imagine Saddam Hussein, clearly a wicked man who caused a lot of difficulty for Klal Yisrael, but he's the leader of a people, and he had the power of life and death. He could assassinate, or he could, summarily kill people. So do you make a bracha on him? So interestingly, the Kaf HaChaim says that it applies even to wicked kings, and the Dirshu notes in this Siman in Shulchan Aruch, he brings a famous anecdote. It says that when the German chancellor, this is at the end of the 19th century, when he visited Yerushalayim, and Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld was the Rav in Yerushalayim at the time, he said not to make a bracha on him. And he gave a different reason. Not that he didn't have the power or any other reason, other than he said this German chancellor, the Kaiser, was Mizera Amolik, about which it says Moche Timche. This is already in the late 19th century, amazingly. And therefore he said he was Zera Amolik and you don't make a bracha on him. But were it not for that, you would make a bracha. So you see that wicked kings, you still make a bracha on them. Now, there's a very interesting tshuva of the Rav Moshe Sternbuch. Rav Moshe Sternbuch, well known to us here in London, he left London and then he went to South Africa and then is now in Yerushalayim. Of course, they are based in Yerushalayim. When he was in South Africa, he was asked the question, do you make a bracha on the president of South Africa? So what is the halacha generally with presidents? With kings and queens, it seems pretty clear you make the bracha. But what about presidents or indeed prime ministers? If you were to have meetings, maybe you have had meetings with with Boris Johnson, would you make a bracha on him? On one hand, he's got, he's in the top job. On the other hand, he doesn't really have the power of life and death. But perhaps you could say that he has the power to declare war, or in America, he's got the power to pardon capital punishments. So do you make a bracha on presidents or prime ministers? So take a look at this tshuva, very interesting tshuva. She'elo, al nosi ha-medina shel Drum Africa, v'chedoimeh, im levarech shenosim mechvei. Did you make this bracha on a president, in his case of South Africa? Says Rav Moshe Sternbuch, b'zichroini k'shegia le'eretz Yisrael lebikur hanosi me'America. I remember many years ago when I was in Eretz Yisrael that the president of America came to Israel. And the Rabbonim debated whether or not you make the bracha shenosim michvoidei. V'ladaiti, and my opinion is, kiven she'ma'amodu hu tolu v'omed b'hachlotas beis hanivchorim, the United States of America, their president, he is subject to the electorate. Whether or not he's going to say a second term, it's not up to him. He may or may not be voted on. And since his power is very fettered, is very contained, therefore ein levarech. What is the difference between him, who probably has got more power than the Queen of England? So how come on her you do make a bracha, but on presidents not? And it's not compared to the melucha, the royalty in England, even today in the 21st century. Here's one difference. Did you know that the Queen has to sign off every piece of legislation? Now, although it's a procedural thing and she opens Parliament and she signs off legislation, but technically no law can be passed without her royal approval. Another point is that her position is hereditary. first in line, second in line, 10th in line to the throne. As opposed to a prime minister or president, it's not hereditary. The kavod malachim mamish, and the honor given to her is mamish, like tremendous, kavod given down to the kings over the generations. Even though she doesn't get involved in the day-to-day sort of political running of the country, at the end of the day, you need her signature on every statute. There's some very quirky laws, just by the way, that I saw yesterday. I read somewhere that technically she owns every dolphin in any water in the British Isles, and she owns every mute swan. Another fun fact. So these are all quirky, historical, procedural type of laws. But says Rav Sternbuch, at the end of the day, her honor is real, and therefore you make a bracha. And the kavod given to her has not diminished over the years, etc., etc. Now, other poskim do argue regarding the president, and they say that you could and you should make a bracha on the president of America. And the reasons they say is because that they have the power to declare war, and like I said, to pardon capital punishments, etc. So far the story is, over royalty, kings or queens, you would make a bracha. Over presidents, the machlokas amongst the poskim. Some say yes and some say no. It's always good to know that you can err on the side of caution, and if there's a sofek, you make the bracha without shame v'malchus. Right? That's always but with a king or queen, you would make the bracha with shame v'malchus. Now, let's go back to our royal motorcade outside Grudzinski. So there's a famous Gemara. Again, it's the same Gemara in Brachos Nun Ches Dalef. Take a look at paragraph 8. Rav Sheshes Saginar Hava. Gemara in Brachos Nun Ches Dalef. Rav Sheshes was blind. Hava ka'ozdi kula amal lekbuli api malka. Now, when he was living, all the people were running out to visit a passing royalty, passing king. V'kom ozel badai Rav Sheshes himself wanted to go to greet this king. I guess to make the bracha, lahavchin, like we discussed. Ashkechei hahumina. There was a certain min, an Apikoros, who met Rav Sheshes on his way out to sort of go with all the people who wanted to see the king. Amalei chatz v'lenar kagani laya. In a very disparaging, disrespectful way, this Apikoros said to Rav Sheshes, "You can't see, you're blind. Why are you going? What are you going to see?" Omalei, so Rav Sheshes said back to this min, "Say chozi, take a look. You'll see that I know more than you." That's what happened. Cholaf gunda kamaisa, the first wave of sort of the wave of people came past. The procession went past. So kiko avsha, when it became very noisy, Omalei hahumina, the min said, "Oh, Asa Malka, here comes the king." So Omalei Rav Sheshes, no, lo ka'osi. No, you're missing it. He's not coming. Cholaf gunda tinyana, a second wave of the procession came past. Kiko avsha, when it got very noisy, everyone was clapping and cheering, and Omalei hahumina, oh, hashta ka'osi Malka, the king's coming. Omalei Rav Sheshes, lo ka'osi Malka. No, the king's not coming yet. Again, Rav Sheshes is blind. Cholif tlisoi, when a third wave of the procession went past, suddenly Kikoshovsky became very silent. Omalei Rav Sheshes said, "Vadai hashta osi Malka." Clearly the king is coming now. Omalei ahumina min olacha, and sure enough the king went past. So he said, "How did you know?" So Omalei to malchusa da'ara kein malchusa d'rakia. The earthly kingdom is just a sort of a mirror, if you like, a semblance. It gives us a smell of what real Malchus is, of Malchus in Shemayim. And it says about Malchus in Shemayim, T'chsiv, Tsev Amata B'Har Lifnei Hashem, V'nei Hashem Oiver V'Ruach Gedol V'Chozok Mefarik Harim. The noise and the strength of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is smashing mountains and Meshabes Slom and breaking stones. V'lo B'Ruach Hashem. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not in that wind, in that strong breaking wind, but V'lo B'Rash Hashem, and Hashem is not in that noise. V'acharash eish, and after the rash and that tremendous noise, there's fire. Lo ba'eish Hashem, v'acha eish kol demam dako. After the fire and all this noise, there's this very still, silent sound. Ki osa malka, and that's when the melech comes. So you see, that's how he knew. And the Gemara says that he carried on and says that the king went past in that silence, and posach Rav Sheshes v'kom mevarach. Fine. And then he made the bracha. And in fact, the min said, you can't see, and yet you're making a bracha. So fine. And then, so you see from this Gemara, Rav Sheshes is a precedent that even though he was blind, you still make the bracha. What happened to the min? He was very disrespectful, so his end was not a happy one. Okay. But the Chidah in Birkei Yosef says that a blind person, and indeed anyone seeing a royal entourage, makes the bracha, even if the king is behind some sort of barrier, like in a carriage, or is not visible in sort of behind tinted windows, behind the sort of the Bentley, the royal Bentley. You still make the bracha because the proof is Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes couldn't see the king, but the king was there. So if the queen didn't want to wind down the windows outside Kuczynski, then but you knew she was there somehow, or you went to the procession in the next few days and the queen was there, and you just can't see her, then according to the Chidah, you would make the bracha, even if she's behind, tinted windows or whatever. However, the Ksaf Sofer brought in the Chasam Sofer on the second box, he argues, and he distinguishes between a blind man and being behind this sort of partition. What's the chiluk? The chiluk is this. With Rav Sheshes, the king was there. It's just that he couldn't see him. Masha'en Kain, if the queen or the king is sitting in a car with tinted windows and you can't see, there's a partition, there's a mechitza behind, and maybe that's different. So again, the poskim with this, whether or not, if you see the car go past and you can't actually, if there's a window and you can see through, then I think it's clearly make a bracha. But if it's tinted or if it's from a distance and you can't see the queen and she's behind some sort of partition, then this would be a machlokas between the Chidah and the Ksaf Sofer. Okay. Let's just take a look at the Mishnah Berurah in paragraph 9. He brings this. He says, "Umash b'Gemara, afilu suma, even a blind person k'sheyadeh shamelech over mevorech." When he knows that the king is going past, he would make a bracha based on the above Gemara. Okay, fine. So just to summarize, what have we said? Do you make a bracha if that were to happen? Kuczynski tomorrow, just be there. Maybe you never know. If you were be there tomorrow and the queen would go past, so then it would seem pretty clear if she's there, she's visible, that you would indeed make a bracha on her. The bracha that we brought of Shenosan michvoide lebasa v'dam. However, if on a president or a prime minister, then that is debated, machlokas in the poskim. It turns on whether or not they have sufficient power and sufficient honor, because you could argue that their positions are not hereditary, they're elected, etc., etc. On the other hand, other poskim say that they do have the power to declare war, to pardon capital punishments, and that could be sufficient. So that's machlokas in the poskim. If the queen is behind some sort of barrier where you can't actually see her, but you know she's there, then that will be subject to this machlokas between the Chidah and the Ksaf Sofer. Okay, let's leave that there.